Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. Startling new details are emerging about Donald Trump's trip this past weekend to Italy. The president and first lady traveled to Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis. Amidst the world leaders, Trump met briefly with the president of Ukraine.
Peace summit of sorts for President Trump and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. The two leaders face to face, seated inches apart inside St. Peter's Basilica for a 15-minute one-on-one about Ukraine's war with Russia.
Yes, just 15 minutes, and that was in keeping with Donald Trump's approach the entire trip. All in all, Trump was on the ground in Italy for only 14 hours. That's it. Trump left immediately after the services in St. Peter's Square, stopping only for handshakes or greetings with a few of the dignitaries. As the New York Times reports, it was a startlingly fast turnaround for the first overseas trip of a new president and left no time for discussions of his tariffs on the European Union, his turn towards normalizing relations with Russia, or his insistence that Europeans must take far larger responsibility for their own defense. Mr. Trump told aides he wanted to make it back to his golf resort in New Jersey before the end of the day. That's right. Instead of meeting with several world leaders to talk about crashing stock markets or to discuss trade policy or even to share updates on the Ukraine-Russia negotiations, Donald Trump wanted, before the end of the day, to get in some golf at his course in New Jersey. So Trump was one of the first leaders to leave Rome. When Air Force One arrived back in the United States, Trump took the helicopter to the golf course, while First Lady Melania Trump went somewhere else. Back in Rome, before Trump departed, there had been agreement between the United States and Ukraine that the brief Trump-Zelensky chat had been smooth.
White House calling it a very productive discussion. Zelensky later saying,
productive meeting. I don't want to go to a lot of details.
And on social media, laying out his priorities from that meeting: protecting lives of our people, full and unconditional ceasefire, and reliable and lasting peace.
A Ukrainian spokesperson suggested a second meeting would happen on Saturday, but a Trump spokesperson squelched that, saying a second meeting would not occur because of the, quote, very tight schedules of the presidents. Because, golf takes time, and the sun wasn't going to stay up forever on Saturday. Donald Trump may have also been motivated to leave Italy quickly because he was surrounded by European leaders he has repeatedly denounced as freeloaders unwilling to pay their fair share of the continent's defense. One of those leaders, French President Macron, appeared to snub a Trump handshake just before the Zelensky meeting. In any case, the funeral itself served as a reminder of how strongly Pope Francis had criticized the Trump administration's policy on mass deportations of migrants. During the homily, Cardinal Baptiste Ray referred to the pontiff's trip to the border between the United States and Mexico, one of the Pope's many gestures in favor of refugees and displaced persons. By all accounts, Pope Francis was outspoken.
But whether it was the President of the United States or the President of the Russian Federation or whoever, he would say what he thought was the right thing to say for the Pope.
In 2016, while returning from a trip to Mexico, that meant speaking out against U.S. conservatives over mass migration when he said, "A person who thinks only about building walls is not Christian." Then candidate Donald Trump fired back.
For a religious leader to question a person's faith is disgraceful.
Francis and his social agenda will no doubt be on the minds of cardinals when they elect the new pope next month.
But on the mind of Donald Trump this past weekend was golf. Now, to be fair, Trump did make a few posts on social media on the way back to the United States. He criticized Russia's latest attacks on Ukraine,
posting, "There was no reason for Putin to be shooting missiles into civilian areas," and adding, "It makes me think that maybe he doesn't want to stop the war."
And if Putin doesn't stop the war, what will the United States and Europe do next? Well, European leaders don't know because Trump didn't make time to talk about the options. To be fair, Donald Trump can always call European leaders to discuss the strategy for Ukraine and anything else. Still, diplomats will tell you there's nothing as powerful and clear as a face-to-face meeting. Donald Trump, though, couldn't be bothered to spend much time with any leader in Rome. And on top of making time to play golf, Donald Trump also took time to follow the National Football League draft. He wrote on True Social, "What is wrong with NFL owners? Are they stupid? Deion Sanders was a great college football player and was even greater in the NFL. He's also a very good coach, streetwise and smart. Therefore, Shador, his quarterback son, has phenomenal genes and is all set for greatness. He should be picked immediately by a team that wants to win. Good luck, Shador, and say hello to your wonderful father.
After the President's Truth Social post, the Browns finally took Shuster Sanders. Does the President think he deserves credit for Sanders getting picked? And does he think going to the Browns is better than being undrafted?
Hey, all I will say is the president put out a statement, and a few rounds later he was drafted. So I think the facts speak for themselves on that one, Peter.
And with that, Caroline Levitt proved that she knows as little about football as she knows about anything else. The few rounds was 4 rounds. Sanders was drafted 4 rounds after Trump's tweet. In other words, after Trump implored NFL teams to draft Sanders, more than 120 other players were selected before that. But whatever. Everything is spin from the Trump White House, including suggestions that Trump had substantive meetings with world leaders this weekend about the issues of our time. The fact is, Donald Trump's biggest priority was playing golf. By the way, Laura Ingraham, one of Donald Trump's most outspoken defenders on Fox News, recently got corrected and shamed on her own live show.
Right now, we are worried about the constitutional crisis.
Right. Oh, the Constitution?
We are worried about the constitutional crisis and the lack of this president following the Supreme Court. I'm sure you believe in the Supreme Court and you believe in the rule of law in this country.
The debate centered on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was deported out of the United States without due process and then jailed in El Salvador.
What process do you think is still due an individual who 2 courts found had reasonable belief to believe he had an affiliation with MS-13, who his wife initially said had scratched her and caused a bruising on her body? What process would make you feel like the Constitution and our framers' understanding of it would be fulfilled?
So, Laura, you and I can disagree on, this individual in particular. I'm not here to really advocate for one person. That needs to happen in court. No evidence has actually ever been presented.
You went to El Salvador. Now you're saying it's not about him? Of course it's about him.
Due process.
You went to El Salvador for a political stunt, and now you're saying it's not about him.
It is about this case. Laura, it is about the rule of law. This is a bipartisan issue. It transcends partisan politics. That's why a conservative-leaning Supreme Court has said that Donald Trump must facilitate the return of this individual. This is very dangerous. We are turning into an authoritarian country, and there are Americans from all across the political spectrum who are deeply concerned about this.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular is from that thing I sent who wrote, "Laura is so condescending and disingenuous." Indeed. I look forward to reading your comments about Donald Trump making a fast turnaround in Italy so he could get back to New Jersey the same day and play golf. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.